The boy had killed his first buck alone. It was a clean shot, lungs pierced just behind the shoulder, the animal folding to its knees beneath the frost-thinned pines like it had been called home by God himself. He stood over it after the kill, breathing hard, not from the shot but from the climb back down the ridge. His hands trembled, and not from the cold. Blood steamed in the snow at his feet, a red bloom blooming slow and wide. His name was Isaac, 17 that winter, though still narrow in the shoulders and quiet in the eyes, the kind of boy who got looked past in a room. He dressed the carcass fast, the way his uncle taught him, and hoisted the haunch over his back. The snow muffled every sound but the drip of blood from the hindquarter, trailing him downhill like a rope unspooled. He was a good mile from the cabin when he heard the splash. At first he thought it was ice calving from the river bank, but then came a cough, wet and scraping, and then silence again. Isaac crouched low behind a drift, his knife still damp with gut. The trees down by the creek had iced over, and the river ran black and sluggish beneath the white crust, its edge rimmed with broken reeds. He crept closer. She was naked from the waist up, her back scarred like some animal had raked her with claws. Her skin was the color of wet bark, and her hands clutched the reeds as she tried to drag herself onto the shore. One leg kicked beneath her, tangled in a hem of sodden gray cloth. He saw the iron around her ankle, open now, unlocked somehow, and the blood leaking out from under it. She saw him. They stared at each other a long time, longer than made sense. He didn't move, neither did she. Then her head dropped sideways into the mud. He didn't think. He dropped the haunch, grabbed her by the arms, and heaved. She didn't fight him. She didn't even wake. Her body was burning with cold, limp as a thawed fawn. By the time he got her up the ridge, his legs were shaking from the weight. The wind had picked up and was running through the pines with a low animal moan. He staggered into the cabin with her cradled in his arms, threw the door shut with his foot, and laid her near the hearth. She didn't stir. The fire was low. He stoked it, covered her with every hide he had. The iron ring was still on her leg. She coughed once in her sleep. The sound pulled something tight in his chest. He sat against the far wall, just beyond the reach of firelight, and watched her all night. Her body shivered, her breathing hitched. At some point she woke, and their eyes met again, but this time she said nothing, only stared, then turned her face to the fire and said no more. In the morning, he cut the iron loose. It clattered onto the wood floor like a confession. The tracks were already behind him. They'd been behind him since the moment he touched her. The men who would come, he knew their kind, knew the dogs they kept and the horses they rode and the laws they believed hung over every human soul but their own. Isaac had lived most of his life at the edge of that world, a quiet boy under the boot of older men, silent when beaten, helpful when called, quick with a skinning knife and quicker to shut his mouth. But now he had carried a hunted woman from the river. That made him a hunted thing too. She said her name 2 days later, Ruth. She said it with a voice that still cracked from cold and smoke, her lips splitting as she spoke. Her eyes were older than her body. She looked 20, maybe, but her stare had weight. He asked no questions. She gave no answers. They ate venison together in silence, and the only time she looked at him long was when he brought in water from the creek, steaming in the pot. On the third morning, the snow turned wet. The ground softened. The trail he'd left the day he found her, the haunch forgotten, his tracks dragging from the water to the cabin, was beginning to show. She saw him watching the woods through the window. "They'll come," she said. "I know," he replied. Neither one said what would happen if they found her here. They left that night. He gave her boots that belonged to his mother, long dead, and wrapped her in a buffalo coat that had once been his father's. They moved quiet, moving north. Isaac knew the land, had trapped and hunted these woods since he was old enough to walk with a snare. He chose high ground, rocky places where their tracks wouldn't stick, creeks that ran shallow and fast enough to carry scent away. They didn't speak. She walked with a limp. He carried most of the gear. By the second night, they found a hunter's cave above a split valley with just enough dry wood inside for one fire. They didn't light it. The hounds were too close now. At dawn, they heard them, distant, low, but clear, hounds' bays rising against the tree line. She tensed. He watched her face. It didn't twist with fear. It hardened. There was a scar on her jaw he hadn't noticed before, long and flat like something had once torn it with wire. "They'll keep coming," he said. She nodded. "We need to move." Her voice was hoarse. "I won't go back." "You won't," he said. And she didn't ask him how he knew. That day they crossed into the country where no one lived. The pines gave way to thick birch, and the rivers split into narrow runs thick with ice. Isaac knew of an old settler's station 5 days' walk from here, built against the cliffs that curved into the North Pass. It had been empty for years and the trail to it overgrown, but it was shelter, and it was far, far from roads, far from bloodhounds and men in coats with silver buttons and horses that didn't tire. They moved fast. Isaac laid traps behind them as they walked. Deadfalls, trip lines, nothing to kill, just to slow. He was changing, he could feel it. The quiet boy was burning out of him. In his place was something harder, colder, forged out of necessity, and he didn't mourn it. That night they slept in the hollow of an overturned pine, snow piled over them like a coffin's lid. She lay curled with the coat wrapped to her neck, hands tucked into her belly. He listened to her breathe and stayed awake until the light came back. And the hounds came again. Closer. Isaac broke trail through a cragged defile, his hands raw from ice. Ruth stumbled once, blood slicking her ankle again where the shackle had rubbed open. He stopped, dropped his pack, tore a strip from his own shirt to wrap her leg. Her eyes met his. "You don't have to keep running," she said. "Yes, I do. They'll kill you." He cinched the cloth tight. "They'll try." Something passed between them then, not love, not yet, but something like allegiance, like two stones ground together in the same river. They reached the station on the 6th night. It was half buried in snow, the roof sunk at one corner, but the chimney was intact. Isaac cleared the hearth. Ruth gathered wood. When the fire finally caught, they both sat close and neither said a word. He handed her a piece of smoked meat from his bag. She took it. Outside, the wind was dying, but there was a sound beneath it now. The hounds had found his trail. The dogs reached the valley mouth at dawn. Their cries were sharp now, certain, no longer the scattered whines of beasts sniffing ghosts in the wind. They had Isaac's scent, or hers, or both. He heard them before he saw the prints. The station's one glassless window let in only the faintest light, but it was enough to see his breath when he rose, boots stiff with frost, every joint aching like he'd aged a decade overnight. She was already up. She sat against the far wall, hands clasped around her knees, hair tangled across her face. She hadn't slept. Or if she had, she'd done it without letting her guard fall. Her eyes snapped to his the moment he moved. "They're close," he said. She didn't flinch, she only nodded. The station had a root cellar, but no exit. No place to hide once the dogs got within earshot. The roof was too low to climb onto, the walls too warped to barricade. He paced, thinking. She watched him. "They'll come through the east trail," he muttered. "Ridge splits there, straightest shot from the river bend." "You want to fight?" she asked. He didn't answer. "You should run," she said after a moment. "Let them find me. You're not part of this." "I am now." "Why?" He stopped moving. The firelight made his shadow crawl up the wall beside her. "Because you were in the river, because I found you, because it should have been someone else, but it was." She looked away, but not fast enough to hide her expression. Not sadness, not pity, something harder. She reached into her coat and drew out the iron cuff he'd cut from her leg. She kept it. "When they come," she said, "they'll want this first, proof I'm real, proof I was ever here. Then we don't give it to them." He took it from her hand. By midday, they'd stripped the cabin bare, food wrapped, ashes buried. The dogs were climbing the ridgeline now, their voices echoing off the slopes. He counted at least 3, more behind, and men too, men who would shoot first and ask nothing later. There was one way out, not down the trail but through the ravine, steep, frozen. A place Isaac had only crossed once when the river overflowed and he had no choice. It meant skirting the edge of a frozen cliff and dropping into the narrows where the light never reached and the ice never fully cracked. But it was the only way that wouldn't leave prints. They packed in silence. He carried more now. She still limped, but her steps were sure, determined. The sun was a ghost behind gray cloud. The wind bit into their cheeks like knives. They moved. It took 3 hours to reach the mouth of the ravine. The cliff wall to their left was sheer granite, eaten through by ice. To the right, a drop of 30 feet into a black run of water that had once been a river but now was just melt and stone and memory. Isaac moved first, boots finding the old handholds, one palm pressed to the stone. She followed, slow, careful. A crack echoed behind them. Gunfire. Isaac turned. Far above, on the trail they'd abandoned, he saw a rider dismounting. Long coat, hat pulled low, a man with a silver badge and a rifle slung across his back. The law had found them. The man pointed. 2 others flanked him, rifles raised. "They saw us," Isaac said, "but they can't follow here, not on horseback." "They won't need horses. We move." They slipped down the ravine, snow crust breaking beneath their boots. Twice she fell, twice he caught her. His hands were raw, his breath smoked like a furnace. They didn't stop. That night they didn't light a fire. They found a hollow where the cliff bent inward. She slept in his coat. He kept watch. At some point the wind changed. No more dogs, no more voices, just silence. Too much silence. He knew what that meant. The men had split. They were flanking the ravine, trying to cut them off. These weren't just slave catchers. These were men who hunted for the thrill of the corner, who liked to watch their prey exhaust itself before the kill. He thought of his uncle then, long dead, a bitter man, raised Isaac with a hard hand and a harder mouth, but he taught him this, that nothing in the wild shows mercy. It only chooses between threat and meat. Isaac chose. By the 4th day, Ruth couldn't walk without leaning on him. The wound at her ankle had reopened. The cold made it worse. He built a sled from branches and twine, pulled her when she could no longer stand. She didn't speak. He didn't ask her to. The forest changed around them. Fewer pines, more rock, less snow, signs of life, rabbit tracks, squirrel scat. They were leaving the dead zone of winter and crossing into the country where spring hadn't yet come, but death had already passed. That night they found a hunter's shrine, just a ring of stones and bones half sunk in dirt, a carved totem nailed to a tree. Isaac didn't recognize the symbol. Ruth did. She said one word, Kanza. "You know these people?" he asked. She nodded. "We're on their land now." "That good." She met his eyes. "It's not worse." The next morning he left her sleeping and doubled back. He moved like a shadow now, a ghost. His boots left little mark. He knew how to mask his scent, how to cover prints with pine boughs, how to double-step so the track read old. The bloodhounds weren't stupid, but they were eager. He fed them lies. By noon, he saw smoke. The men had made camp just below the southern ridge. 4 tents, 3 horses, 2 cages. Empty. He stared a long time. The cages meant they didn't want her dead, not yet. That meant they'd come slower, trying to box her in. They were confident. He returned to Ruth, found her sitting up, watching the tree line. She hadn't touched the food. "We need to end this," she said. "They'll hunt us forever," he answered. "Then we hunt them first." He didn't argue. They made a plan. It was simple. And it was cruel. That night, Isaac moved alone. Ruth stayed behind, too weak to run, but she gave him the iron shackle. She sharpened one edge, filed it against stone until it was a blade. He crept into the camp past midnight. The dogs were tied close to the fire, lazy, fed, comfortable. He knifed the first quietly. The second got one bark out before he buried the iron into its throat. Then he moved to the cages. He filled them with rocks, a coat, a hood. Let them think she was caught. Then he disappeared. At dawn, the men woke to silence. Then confusion. Then one of them opened the cage. The blade trap triggered, straight through the throat. Screaming followed. Isaac didn't wait. He fired one shot from the trees, hit a man in the leg, watched him fall. The others grabbed rifles, fired wild. They thought they were under siege. In the panic, one fled. Isaac let him go. The rest he finished slow. When he returned to Ruth, she was sitting upright, firelight in her eyes. She looked at him, face unreadable. "It's done," he said. "No," she said, "it started." And he understood. There would be others, there always were. But now they knew how to be hunted. And how to hunt back. The snow melted first along the river. It peeled back in long, wet ribbons, revealing the black earth beneath, the dead grass matted down like old hair. Spring hadn't come yet, not truly, but it was near enough that the birds started returning, cautious, calling out their thin, sharp songs from the canopy above the gorge. They buried the bodies without ceremony. Isaac dragged what was left of the three men to the bend and rolled them into a pit he dug with his hands. He didn't speak while he worked. The iron shackle lay beside the fire, its edge dulled from killing. Ruth had cleaned it anyway, set it on a flat stone. She sat cross-legged in the smoke, ankle-wrapped, face thinner than it had been, eyes dark as coal, watching. No prayers, no stones, no markers. The men would vanish into the soil the way their kind always did, eventually. Only the dogs had been burned. Isaac wouldn't let the flies get them. They hadn't chosen who they served. That evening, Ruth asked him a question. "You ever killed a man before them?" Isaac shook his head. "Not before you." She let the silence sit. "Feels like cutting rope, don't it?" she said. He looked at her. "Like pulling something taut, then slicing it loose. Makes a sound you don't forget." He thought about that, about the way the rifle bucked when he fired. The look in the last man's eyes before the blade fell. That final moment when breath left a body and the world went quiet again. "Yeah," he said, "it does." That was all. They didn't stay long near the camp. By the time the frost left the trees, they were already moving again, deeper into the north, past the old boundaries, past the ghost farms, into a place where even the cartographers had stopped drawing lines. Isaac had a map, but it was more suggestion than fact. He studied it each night by firelight, tracing the edges, eyes flicking to the folds as if something new might appear. Ruth kept watch most nights now. Her leg was healing slowly. She'd lost the limp but not the pain. She never spoke of the plantation she'd run from, not even when he asked where she'd learned to lay traps, or skin a bird without tearing the flesh, or sharpen steel so fine it split bark without a sound. "They taught me by accident," she said once. "Didn't mean to, but they did." "Who?" "The men with whips, the ones with keys. You watch someone enough, you learn how they move, and how they blade." He never asked again. They built their first shelter on a bluff overlooking a marshland. It was little more than a lean-to at first, branches, hides, clay sealed into cracks, but it kept the rain off. By midsummer they had a chimney, a smoke hole, a root pit. She tanned the hides, he hunted. There was peace but not comfort. Neither of them trusted it. They took turns patrolling the perimeter. The first man came in August. He didn't announce himself. He crept through the brush like he thought he was clever. Isaac caught him in the snare just past the creek. He was young, ragged, thin as a weasel, not a bounty man, too jittery, a scavenger, maybe a deserter. He had a rusted knife and a half-rotted boot on one foot. He didn't beg, but he did cry when Ruth stepped from the trees holding the old shackle, blade edge gleaming. "What do we do with him?" Isaac asked. "Nothing. You want to let him go." "No," she said, "we do nothing. Let him choose what to do with us." The boy tried to run that night. He didn't make it past the second trap. Isaac buried him without words. That was the last time they snared a man. After that, they stopped burying. Word spread somehow. Ruth could feel it. She didn't need proof. The way birds moved, the way the forest quieted sometimes, the shift in the air. It was always the same, the calm before pursuit. Somewhere, someone had learned she was alive. Somewhere, someone had put a price on her head. She took to marking trees, signs from her childhood. Symbols only the women of her mother's line would know. When Isaac asked what they meant, she told him. "They're warnings." "For who?" "For anyone else like me." That was how it began. In the third year, they weren't alone anymore. The first woman came with her daughter, half dead, ribs sharp under torn skin. The girl was barely breathing. Ruth nursed her through the fever. Isaac stood watch 6 nights straight. Then came an old man, then 2 brothers, then a mother with no voice and a boy who wouldn't speak. They didn't stay at the bluff. That would have made it a grave. They spread out, built shelters, formed paths between them, hidden with brush. They shared food, skills, memory. Ruth became something else, not a leader, not exactly, but a gravity. They called her the River Woman. No one ever said why. She didn't correct them. Isaac stopped asking what they were building. He already knew. Not a home, not a refuge, a threshold. A place you crossed when you had nothing left and needed to be remade. The Hounds came again in the 5th year. But not from the east. From the west, a new path, a new force. Mercenaries this time, paid men, 6 of them mounted and armed with firebombs and steel nets. They didn't care about law, they wanted legend. They wanted to break what had risen from the trees, wanted Ruth's head and Isaac's hide, wanted to scatter the whisper. Isaac met them in the glen. Alone. He stood where the trail forked and waited. They came in hard, smiling, laughing. One of them spat at his boots. "Where's the bitch?" Isaac didn't answer. They asked again. He didn't speak. Then he raised his rifle and shot the laid horse. The beast dropped screaming, the rider crushed beneath. The others fumbled, cursing. The trap lines snapped shut. From the trees came fire. Not bullets, arrows, knives, spears. Not Ruth's people, survivors. The river folk. The boy who hadn't spoken was the first to strike. Drove a blade into a mercenary's spine and didn't flinch when the blood hit him. It was over in minutes. Ruth appeared after. She didn't speak. She only knelt beside the last living man, his leg shattered by a snare, and showed him the shackle. "Ask your master if he remembers this," she said. Then she crushed his hand beneath a stone, and walked away. That winter, Isaac sat beside the fire with her, and neither said anything for a long while. Outside, the snow was falling soft. He looked at her face. She looked at his. He said her name. Ruth. She turned toward him. I'm not afraid anymore, he said. She nodded. Then you understand what we are. And he did. They weren't hiding. They were waiting. The trail had found them once. Now they would wait for it to return. And this time they would follow it back. Spring came early and hard. Rain carved rivulets into the earth, turned the lowlands to mire. The ice cracked loose from the river like breaking glass, and with it came driftwood, bones, and other things lost in the thaw, old ropes, bits of iron, once a boot with something still inside. Ruth watched it all go by, unmoved. She stood on the bluff above the bend, cloak snapped by wind, the shackle blade at her side. Isaac stood a ways behind, hands in his coat, his rifle slung across his shoulder. The settlement had grown. They no longer called it that. It didn't have a name, nothing spoken aloud. But among those who lived there it was understood, a safe passage, a place beyond reach, not a town. Towns could be charted. This was a silence. More cabins now, each built to face the others, not the woods. Watchlines, signal posts, paths patrolled in shifts. The hunters came back with more than food. They brought news, whispers from traders who dared the borderlands, from deserters crossing the broken southern ridges, from runaways with lash marks barely closed. Something was shifting in the world below. Fires in the cotton fields, gunpowder in church basements, names scrawled on jail walls. A reckoning was building. But the name that surfaced most, softly, in hushed awe or bitter spite, was Ruth's. They called her a ghost, a myth, a blade in the night. Some said she couldn't be killed. Others said she died years ago, and what moved now was only vengeance, clothed in her skin. Ruth never answered these tales. She didn't need to. The dead who had tried to disprove her were buried shallow. The living remembered. But Isaac saw the cost, the way she moved slower now, how her eyes lingered on the fire longer each night, not tired, never that, just older, like the weight had begun pressing down, the weight of being a symbol. He wanted to ask her if she ever missed being only a woman, but he didn't. Because he knew the answer. There was no only anymore. That summer, a rider came. Not by mistake, not in search of shelter or trade. He came deliberate, alone, on a pale horse that looked half-starved. The man wore no badge, but his coat was cut from marshal's cloth. Blue wool faded to gray. His face was lined, beard unkempt. But his eyes were cold and clear, the kind that had seen fields full of bodies and never looked away. He stopped at the river and waited. Said nothing. Made no move toward the bluff. He had a satchel, in it a ledger bound in rawhide. He sat cross-legged on a rock and stared upstream, as if waiting for someone to speak first. They sent Isaac down. He didn't speak, just watched the man from behind a pine until the stranger stood and turned. You, Isaac? Yes. The man nodded once. They say you're the one who pulled her out of the water. Isaac said nothing. She saved a boy once, the man said. Did she ever tell you? No. She was 9. Her brother had his leg caught in a sawmill gear. She climbed into the machine to free him, cost her half her back, thought she'd die from it. Isaac stared at him. The man opened the satchel, drew out the ledger. I was there, her name, been written down a dozen times since, in places you can't imagine, in books not meant for light. What do you want? I came to warn her. Why? The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because the men who want her gone don't believe in ghosts, and they've stopped sending dogs. Isaac's jaw tightened. What are they sending? Fire. The man turned and looked toward the bluff. They'll come through the mountains, with mercenaries, conscripts, ex-soldiers, not the sloppy kind, not bounty men, real ones, burners, cutters, the kind that salt the earth behind them. He closed the ledger. They call it a reclamation. Isaac's breath slowed. They'll come for the river, the man said. They'll poison it first, then torch what can't be turned. They'll take the children, hang the old, brand the ones they don't kill. He looked at Isaac. They're not hunting her anymore. They're hunting what she built. Isaac stared, unmoving. Why tell me? The man shrugged. She carried my brother out of that mill. He turned. Tell her to burn what needs burning and to bury what's left deep. Then he walked into the woods and did not return. They gathered the next night. Not all, but enough, the ones who'd held blades, the ones who still had ash under their nails. Ruth stood in the center of the fire circle. Isaac watched her eyes. They weren't afraid, but they weren't hopeful either. We don't run, she said. They nodded. We don't fight them straight, she added. More nods. They want to reclaim what they never owned. Let them come. Let them taste what we've kept hidden. She drew the shackle blade, held it up to the light. This is the key. It once kept me. Then it freed me. Then it cut the throats of the men who swore I'd never leave. She looked to the fire. If we die, it won't be in chains. No one cheered. They weren't a people for noise. But the silence between them was iron. The weeks that followed were fevered. The elders hid the children. The maps were burned, the false trails laid, smoke holes sealed, deadfall paths carved. Ruth taught the blade, Isaac taught the rifle. Others built pits for the bodies, for the fire, for the last stand if it came to it. Each dusk, scouts brought back word. They were coming. 200 strong, white coats, red collars, stripped rifles, cavalry flags blackened from old campaigns. The forest watched, waited, and then one night the wind changed, and fire came. They torched the outer trail first, burned the shelters nearest the lowlands, cut the rope bridges, shot arrows with lit pitch. Isaac saw it from the bluff. The sky turned orange. Ruth's face caught the flame glow, no fear, just readiness. She turned to him. You take the east flank, ambush line 3. He nodded. She started down toward the basin. Ruth, he called. She turned. Don't die tonight, he said. Her mouth curved, almost a smile. Not tonight. Then she vanished into the smoke. The battle wasn't a battle. It was a purge, but not the kind they expected. For every fire the invaders set, 3 more flared behind them. For every trap they evaded, another sprung from below. Isaac moved like wind, rifle cracking, blade snapping. The trees held allies now, men and women raised on quiet, trained by silence, born again in blood. They struck from underneath, from above, from within. The first line broke, the second followed. The third held. Isaac watched Ruth strike their captain down, not with a weapon, with her hands. She choked the breath out of him slowly, looking in his eyes the whole time. Then she rose and saw what they'd done to the river. They had salted it. The fish floated belly up, the water burned with lye and ash. Ruth knelt, touched the water, and screamed. Not in pain, Not in fear, in fury. They didn't chase the last soldiers. Didn't need to. The woods would eat them. What mattered now wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. But first came mourning. 30 dead, maybe more, the names spoken, the bodies burned. Ruth stood beside each pyre, head bowed. Isaac held the torch once, his hands didn't shake. When the smoke cleared, they dug again. Not pits, foundations. Wider, deeper, stronger. Not a place to hide. A place to rise. The wind changed again, but this time it carried no fire. Only ash and rain and the distant hush of a world still shifting. What had once been a camp, a refuge, a myth, was now a ruin, and yet it stood. The river was gone, salted past healing, but its shape remained, carved through the land like a scar. Ruth walked its empty bed most mornings, boots sinking into the soot, eyes scanning the shorelines like she might find something worth keeping. She never did. What had lived there was memory, and memory was not soil. It didn't grow. It burned and it hardened and it held. She stopped wearing the shackle blade. Instead, she'd buried it where the river once ran deepest, beneath a cairn of black stones, high enough no child could move it. Isaac asked her why. "It belongs there now," she said. "That piece of me's done." He nodded, but inside he felt the shift. She was changing again, not softening, but withdrawing, as if her bones were pulling back inside her, as if what had burned through her all these years had finally begun to cool. He started walking the perimeter alone. The world outside began to creak apart. They heard it first from the trader who dared the East Ridge, a freedman, once a Union scout, now a drifter with hands too steady for his lies. He came bearing musket balls and rusted nails and word that the South was splitting, armies bleeding each other in fields of clay and thistle, the great plantation houses burning from the inside, and somewhere someone was calling for names, names of those who'd vanished, names of those who'd risen. He had Ruth's name, written in blood on a church wall near Macon. Isaac listened without speaking. The trader said more. Said a marshal had been hanged for refusing to give her up. Said the bounties had stopped, not out of mercy, but fear. Said rumors claimed she had killed a general in his sleep. Ruth just shook her head. "I never met a general." The trader laughed. "That don't matter. Story's better when it lies a little." But she didn't laugh. That night she didn't sleep in the shelter. She sat beside the old cairn. She didn't cry, Ruth didn't cry. But her fingers dug into the earth like she was holding something down. Isaac watched the people change too. Children born in the silence, now old enough to carry knives. Women who had come broken now led the hunting lines. Men with scars up their backs now laughed around fire pits without flinching. The camp had become something else. A people. No name for them, they didn't need one. Their silence was enough, it spoke for them. But Ruth, she'd become a relic, revered, yes, but separate. The one who had brought fire. The one who walked out of the river with nothing but death behind her. They loved her. And feared her. So when she called a gathering in the 6th winter, no one questioned it. They came. All of them. They stood in the hollow near the basin, where the earth still bore the scorch marks of the last purge. Children stood on their parents' shoulders. Old ones sat on stones, 1,000 eyes, a silence deep enough to drown in. Ruth stepped forward. Her hair was streaked with white now, though her face remained unlined by age. Her back was straight, her boots muddy. She said one word. Enough. It dropped like a stone into a still lake. She let it sit. I never wanted this, not this place. I wanted escape. Then I wanted revenge. Then I wanted to survive. She looked at Isaac. He looked back, unmoved. But now, she said, I want something else. She let her eyes roam over the crowd. Children, fighters, the healed, the half-healed, the lost who had found something among her silence. I want to leave this to you. They didn't speak. She hadn't finished. I'm going. Gasps, whispers. A few stepped forward, but she raised her hand. I'm not dying, she said. I'm walking. Where? A boy asked. Where the road takes me. Why? She smiled, the first in days. Because there are others still running, and I want them to know they're not alone. Isaac stepped forward. I'll come. She shook her head. No, not this time. You belong here now. He hesitated. She placed a hand on his chest. You kept me alive. You made me seen. That's more than enough. Then she turned and began walking. No one followed. They watched her vanish into the trees, the same way she had come. Without ceremony. Without sound. Only a trail behind her, faint and fading. Years passed. The camp became a village. Then a legend. Some said Ruth never died. Others said she became part of the forest, a spirit with a knife made from rust and fire. Children were taught to listen at night, not for danger but for footsteps in the riverbed. If they heard them, they were safe. Isaac grew old. He taught the children how to track, how to skin, how to read the trees, but he never carried a rifle again. The blade he kept hidden but never used. On the morning he died, the wind changed one last time. And down by the riverbed, someone found a single footprint. Just one, pressed deep in the ash, pointing west. Somewhere beyond the last mapped ridge, a woman moved through the trees. Her boots left little mark. Her hair was wild, her eyes were older than fire. At her side, no weapon. In her hand, a stone carved with a single line. A warning. A promise. She did not speak. She only walked. Toward the next river. Toward the next soul drowning. Toward the fire not yet lit.